All right, folks. Thank you all for being here. Happy Labor Day, also known as Commie Day. But we can celebrate it. Celebrate the workers' paradise by not working. What a better way to do it. Um, hope you all had a good weekend. Hope you've all been enjoying the day off. I'm doing an extended live Q&A today. Those of you curious, I'll be doing an hour or so. After we jump over to Epic TV, we'll do longer questions. So if any of you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. And yeah, it's good having you all here again. I think a lot of you who used to watch the show in the early days, you might remember my old setup. Yeah. Anyways, this is the old Crossroads setup back in front of my bookshelf. That said, a few things I want to talk about. I want to start by talking about the Chinese economy. We'll go into some other things, including how California is actually draining its water supply, ironically trying to maintain low water levels. Go figure. A lot of what people assumed was happening, in fact. The attempt to remove Donald Trump from office has been shut down, and also the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, there's a push to remove it from Twitter. I'll be going into all this, and of course, questions as well. And that said, folks, thank you all for being here. Let's jump into the first story. I want to show you what's happening with the Chinese economy first off. Now, those of you who've been watching Crossroads for a long time may remember we used to cover a lot of China news, and part of that, a big part of that, was the idea that, well, it looked like the Chinese economy was going to collapse. The Chinese economy, prior to COVID, was in its death throes. I mentioned that about a third of the economy, if you go by surface numbers, is in real estate. The real estate industry was imploding. Another third, roughly, is in manufacturing. Manufacturing is pulling out, and a lot of the other money just from random stuff. But a lot of that was dying. Now they staved off the worst of their economic crisis by exporting the crisis, and after exporting the crisis to the entire world, shutting down essentially global shipping, the CCP lured in foreign investment and essentially stole people's money. It's getting to the point now where they're saying that China, you can't even invest in it anymore. And so even that money's drying up. Let me show you real quick. Epic Times has the story. It says U.S. firms say China has become uninvestable. Commerce Secretary says. It says U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo says American companies have complained to her that China has become uninvestable as the level of risk associated with doing business there has spiked amid factors such as changes to counter-espionage laws and raids on foreign firms. The CCP shot itself in the foot because what the CCP started doing was targeting Americans for like tit-for-tat espionage laws. And so if a Chinese spy gets arrested, like these, the Chinese police stations in New York, or the people upstate who are spying on, I think, Falun Gong and stuff like that, the ones who were spying on, Chinese dissidents, people who believe in, religion and were trying to flee that, the CCP had agents trying to spy on them. Those people were arrested, the CCP agents. And whenever that happens, the Chinese Communist Party retaliates, and oftentimes they go after like foreign journalists, foreign business leaders, foreign entrepreneurs. They'll arrest them and they'll try to hold them for ransom. They'll make trumped up charges and so on. And so they're saying it's becoming too dangerous to do business there. And because it's becoming too dangerous, what's happening? Foreign businesses, foreign investment, it's pulling out of China, happening simultaneously right alongside the implosion of their real estate market. In China, they have a name, by the way, for Xi Jinping. They call him the accelerator, suggesting that he is accelerating the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party. That says, go deeper into this. China jails economic professor who highlighted government's personnel costs. So it's kind of understood among a lot of China experts that the Chinese economy is a giant Ponzi scheme. Essentially, they lie about their numbers. Every year, it's like, 3.5% economic growth. It's like, it works like clockwork. The CCP works off 5 and 15-year plans. And whenever they have these plans, if you're a local official and you don't show numbers, economic data and so on, that aligns with the plans, you get arrested, you get punished, you get charged. And so everybody lies about the numbers. This was the case as well through most of the CCP's history, including, for example, during like the Great Leap Forward. One of the big things they had when the CCP was launching its revolutions in China was they had like goals for farming. And of course, they had massive crop failures. But because nobody wanted to look bad, they were lying on the numbers. And so you had from every province of China, record yields. It's inhuman how much we're farming in China. A lot of the clown journalists in the West repeated it. Look how communism works. In reality, none of it was working. It was utterly failing, and people were lying on the books. And it's the same because, if they didn't, they'd be executed. They'd be, humiliated. They'd have other things happen and they wouldn't get money. The other big thing you have happening now is local politician corruption. And so, well, every level of corruption. And so at every level where there's money coming down the pipeline, everybody takes some, cream off the top, so to speak. Everybody skims off a bit of it, and layer by layer by layer, they all steal money. So they can't afford an audit. Now, what happens when you steal money from a project, the end product is not as good as it was originally intended. So what do? They lie about the quality of the end product to hide the fact they've been stealing money from it. Now, you can only do that so long before the entire system is ready to break down. That's where the CCP is at right now. And so you have this Chinese economics professor pointed out a lot of the doctored data. He got arrested for it. It says, a Chinese court on Thursday handed down a 4.5-year jail term to an outspoken Chinese economics professor who had estimated the high personnel costs of the Chinese government, finding him guilty of, quote, incitement to subvert state power, according to rights websites. How is reporting the truth incitement to subvert state power? Honestly, maybe it's not that far off these days. I feel like if we talk about half of the true stories these days, you might get labeled a domestic terrorist, even in the U.S. If you talk about the anomalies in the election, you might get charged with incitement to subvert state power. In fact, I believe there are a lot of people currently in prison right now waiting for trial for incitement to subvert state power because they believe there was fraud. Let me show you one more thing. We'll jump into the next story. China financial contagion, what it means for the world. Because a lot of you are probably wondering, okay, the Chinese economy is collapsing. Aren't we intertwined? Aren't we so, connected to their economy that if a collapse there happens, it's going to collapse us too? Not necessarily. Great analysis in Epoch Times says China's economic slowdown means the rest of the world will enjoy lower oil prices, lower consumer goods prices, and lower raw materials as China's, and they go into it essentially. The reality is the average American does not benefit almost at all from trade with China. Of course, big firms and investment firms make off like bandits. But for us, a lot of that is, higher costs and so on, because people pay more money to manufacture in China these days than they would in Mexico, which is closer, by the way, than they would in Thailand or Vietnam or any other country, essentially. Because essentially the cost of operating in China is so high, then you deal with theft and gray markets and everything else. The reason a lot of firms go to China, and keep in mind too, shipping costs, but the American taxpayer foots a lot of that because the government subsidizes the cost. Really a pat on the back for big businesses doing business in China at the cost of the American taxpayer. It's really terrible what they do, to be honest. But the reason firms go to China is because going there gives them access to the Chinese market. And so from the government standpoint, hey, more profits abroad, you're accessing one of the most populous countries on earth, I don't know if India's catching up with them. One of the most populous countries in the face of the earth. Businesses make a lot of money with it. The businesses even lobby our government on behalf of the CCP. And so a lot of them get benefits and subsidies and breaks on shipping if they're manufacturing in China and they get the local market. For the American taxpayer, we get ripped off essentially, but business and government they get a lot out of it. So if this does end with China, if trade breaks down, for us it's not going to be ironically going to be better. Will ironically be better off. Other than the fact that, of course, some key goods can only be found in China, including a lot of medical, a lot of drugs, for example. But of course, India is building that up, and other countries are building that up as well. And so there are alternatives that, if things came to a hard close with China, which I don't think it's quite at that point, I think there's going to be some trade. There would be other options fairly quickly. That said, let's jump into the next story. And again, I'll be doing an extended Q&A today. So those of you on YouTube, if you want to join the longer Q&A, I'll probably do an hour today, actually, like, total for the show. By the way, got tea. Those of you wondering, by the way, I have jasmine green tea today. I spilled some of it. But anyways, let me talk about the next story. So there's been rumors of this for a while now, that California does not actually have a water crisis. Now, a lot of you may have heard, for example, about California water prices, that it's unnecessarily high, that they have droughts, there's farming there, and it's much more expensive to live there and farm there because you have to water your plants and water your avocado groves. One of the big narratives for climate change is water shortages and how places are going to just not have any water. People have pointed out that one of the issues you have in California is that some of the main waterways, some of the main sources of water, they drain it straight into the ocean. Because I think there's some stupid thing, like there's like an endangered fish in one of these big waterways. And so rather than allow access to it, they drain the excess water straight into the ocean and dump it in the ocean. Now, by doing that, they keep costs of farming high. They can charge people a premium on water because they can always say, hey, there's water shortages. Don't water your lawn. Don't fill your baths. I grew up in San Diego. When I was a kid, they'd encourage us to get milk jugs, like gallon milk jugs, and you fill it with water and put like a few of them in the bathtub to lower the volume of water needed to fill the bathtub, because you have these milk jugs taking up part of the volume. In other words, in California, you're being fed all these narratives about water shortages. Not enough for your yard, not enough to take a bath in. You got to conserve, you got to reduce, and that's the big narrative. Turns out, again, they're dumping the clean water right into the ocean. And when people see a lot of rain in California, they're like, "Great, we need the water, right?" When there's a lot of, I have a lot of family in Southern California still. When there's rain, they're happy because they're like, "Good, my water bill will go down. Good, it means the reservoirs fill up. Good, it means that we won't have this drought anymore," because the drought is the narrative that the government uses in California to try to rack up prices. Lo and behold, what happens right here? CBS, 11 billion gallons of water released from the Hodges Reservoir. And why did they do it? Well, they did it because they're under state regulations to maintain a low water supply. I'm not even joking. Let me show you. It says, over the past year, 11 billion gallons of water have been wasted/released from the Hodges Reservoir. The city of San Diego said it is under a state order to keep the water level low in the lake. Yeah, we have a water shortage, but the state is mandating low water supplies. You heard that right, folks. It says that they've been under state order to keep the water low. Water District says the city is to blame because the San Diego Public Utilities Department failed to maintain the dam for decades. Del Mar residents, one of the residents there, Barbara Rosario Burras, has recently seen a spike in her water bill from the Santa Fe Irrigation District. And she said she was shocked when she read the notice on her bill explaining why the rates were increasing. Quote, this price increase is due to the city of San Diego's lack of maintenance of Lake Hodges, despite our annual payments to the city for its upkeep. The Santa Fe Irrigation District customer notice read. You getting that, folks? They charge you a premium on water because of water shortages. When there's no longer water shortages, they drain the water by the billions of gallons, while they're telling people to preserve water and, put gallon jugs in your bathtub, they're dumping billions of gallons out into the ocean, maintaining a water shortage, and they're claiming that it's because they can't maintain the reservoir. While they tax people to maintain the reservoir, they're failing to actually maintain. And then when they drain it, they also charge people for the draining. Are you getting how utterly messed up that is? This is what people are dealing with in California. This is the kind of stuff they're dealing with. By the way, if you want to watch a show about how crazy this stuff is happening in California, we have another show on Epoch TV called California Insider. My good friend Sia Mack, he's the host of it. It's wild stuff, folks. That said, we're going to go into but the 14th Amendment attempt to get Trump off the ballots has been shot down yet again. I'll explain what happened with that. We'll also talk about the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. There's a push to remove him from Twitter. Talk about that as well. But for that, we're going to jump over to Epoch TV. So those of you on YouTube, come join us, 25 cents a week. We'll also be doing a special, lot longer Q&A today. So come join us again, Epoch TV, link in the description, and I will see you there. Let me show you a quick trailer before we jump over.
What was the process of actually putting this all together?
Many, many hours of finding the right camera angles and watching it. The first trouble started just after 1 o'clock.
45 pages, here it is right here. Donald Trump has been indicted.
Somber day for the country.
This all happened before President Trump's speech was over.
The founder of the Oath Keepers militia group is headed to prison for more than 18 years.
His lawyers didn't have this
No.
video. The video we're watching right now, his own lawyers did not
No.
have. There was a big question of what did the people do who actually did enter the building.
This is where we picked it up with the security footage that is new. At this point, the story dramatically changes.
The New Jersey man who assaulted a Capitol police officer on January 6th has been sentenced.
So this was withheld.
This was not shown to the defense.
That could be considered exculpatory evidence. This doesn't seem like what a lot of the media is showing.
It's going to change narratives no matter what your political perspective is. What we're after is the truth.